Welcome to the MoCo Show, everyone. This is a very special episode where we will be discussing the boundary changes in Montgomery County. And here is your host, Alex Tsironis.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Alex Tsironis, and we are going to be having a nice little discussion about the boundary analysis issue going on here at MCPS, or with MCPS in our county. And we're joined by our real estate expert, Nurit Coombe. Nurit, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
And we're also joined by former Board of Ed member Jill Ortman-Fouse. Jill, welcome.
Good evening, thank you.
So thank you both for being here. Just like last episode that we did on this, we're just going to kind of chat about what's going on. And obviously, there seems to be two very different sides to what's going on. Last time we had an episode, there was two different Facebook pages. There was like dueling Facebook pages. Now there's one Facebook page, and the other one kind of, I think, has been paused or stopped for the time being. But the one that is still there, I think, is opening up and letting anyone in now. Is that the case?
No, we just have a lot of people. It's still private, and it's very, very busy and active because there's a lot of people that care about this topic.
Gotcha. And I know there was recently a meeting. I think the most recent meeting was at Blair High School.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And the other Facebook page is gone, but the one Montgomery site is now there.
Okay.
Right. So one Montgomery has about 600-700 people, and the other one has about 7,000 people.
7,000.
Over 7,000. Yes.
Gotcha. So that's that's something to check out if you want to take a look at it at that Facebook page. But it's not public. So I guess you got to know someone to get an invite. Is that how it works?
No,
or?
You just go in, ask to be joined, and you will get joined.
Sounds good. And is there anything like behind that? Like, do you have to be on a certain side to be allowed in, or is there what's the reason for it being private?
So I don't know it specifically, but I know that when I request to join in, they never ask me what side I'm at. They just let me in. But I think because sometimes they want to protect from people putting some comments that are maybe not as great, and they just want to make sure that it's staying level-headed, I assume.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's very passionate.
Jill, are you in that Facebook group?
No, because I know a lot of people that were actually bumped from that Facebook group,
okay.
And they said it was just presenting facts, and other people said they tried multiple times to get in and couldn't get in. And I figured with my name, and since I'm a target on that page, I didn't think my chances were very good. In fact, I think somebody just sent me a screenshot maybe the day before yesterday where they said, we reserve the right to get people out of the group.
I know they did one time because somebody put in very racial comments, and they did. But I'm pretty sure you should try it, and I'm sure they'll let you in. I know they haven't asked me. They haven't asked me anything, and I also have a couple of other agents and also members from my group, from my team, and they're all in, and nobody ever asked us any questions, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just kind of jump into this, and WXY has kind of made a frequently asked questions like PowerPoint that they share at their meetings at the beginning of every meeting, and the first question that they answer is, what is the purpose of this study? And they tell us that it's to provide a comprehensive assessment of school boundaries in light of county growth, to receive community feedback on the challenges of creating diverse schools, to understand the related challenges of utilization, diversity, and proximity in school clusters, and finally, to reinforce MCPS's core values of learning, respect, excellence, and equity. And they make it very clear, I want to say 10 to 20 times per meeting, that the purpose of this study is not to redraw school or cluster boundaries. But that has been something that a lot of people are kind of disagreeing with. And they say that initially it was to redraw the boundaries. And was it?
Yeah, absolutely. So on both sides, people are disagreeing. So the people who are saying, no, we don't trust you, it really is supposed to redraw boundaries, no matter how many times you say it's not, we're not going to believe you. And then the other people are saying, wait a minute, we're spending $500,000 to do this, to collect all this data, and you're not going to be making any recommendations? Like, how is that supposed to work? So there's people on both sides of that. First, I didn't thank you for your service as being a teacher. As a former Board of Education member, I have to be sure to do that because we love our teachers. But when we grew by 30,000 students over 20 years and we never had a comprehensive plan, what you end up with is a lot of boundaries that look really gerrymandered, and boundary studies that end up with people questioning why they were done that way. It looks really messy to me. And if we don't have any kind of overall comprehensive plan on how to better utilize our schools, we're going to continue to have these piecemeal boundaries that aren't going to make sense to people.
So-
I think one of the reasons that I first wanted to do this when I was on the board is because I noticed a pattern from the people that were testifying at our Board of Education hearings. And they would say, we need an addition because our school is so overcrowded. We start lunch at our elementary school. Kids get there at 9:15. We start lunch at 10:15 and we don't end till 2:15. And they thought they were the only ones, but I asked for the data and I've got it here. There were a lot of schools like that. And then I would look at other data, like in our COSA meetings, which is requests for transfers, where students would say, I want to go to the school next door because I'm getting bullied. Or, my friends are like causing me to do bad behaviors, whatever it was. And I'd look at the schools next door and they'd have a lot of space, but it was against our policy because we would say that's not a unique circumstance. So I started looking at all these schools that were side by side, where one school was super overcrowded. In fact, our second most overcrowded school, which was 284 students over capacity, had 4 or 5 schools with space around it, which would have addressed that, but we never addressed the boundaries. So over the last 20 years, we have grown by about 30,000 students, but we've never done any comprehensive overall analysis about how we're gonna address that overcrowding. So what we've ended up happening is we've got severely overcrowded schools and underutilized schools, and oftentimes they're side by side. So we're not making the best use of our space. And as I said to you earlier, how I first started noticing this pattern is that when we have these hearings where students advocate for their schools, they would say, or parents advocate for schools, that they started lunch at 10:15 and didn't end till 2:15 because the schools were so overcrowded. Elementary school doesn't start till 9:15, so that's a really wacky time for lunch, so I totally understand their issue. And then I realized they thought they were a one-off, but it was a lot of schools. And then when we were doing these COSAs, which is change of school assignments, where people would say, I want to go to the school next door because of whatever reason, struggling at this school, I'm being bullied, I'm having a mental health issue because of the kids dragging them into something. And I'd look and see, wow, they actually do have space at that school next door. So that seems like logical, but it wasn't part of our policy. You couldn't do it because it wasn't a unique circumstance. So to me, when we have 10,000 students in over 400 portables that we're spending $5 million a year to lease, and 10,000 empty seats, and we're not doing any kind of comprehensive look about what is the low-hanging fruit. I think the last thing I said that prior to when we discussed it was that we're paying $500,000 for this company to give us data, but not to make recommendations. If I'm paying that much money, I want them to look at this data, analyze it, and say, where's the low-hanging fruit? It would cost us over $800 million to put those 10,000 students in portables in seats and additions. Or we could save taxpayer money and have a non-capital solution of just moving a boundary over. In our policy FAA, it calls for adjacent schools. So that's exactly what we'll be looking at.
I'm going to comment several things in here because I'm actually not taking sides, but I hear a lot of people saying a lot of things, and I want to make sure that I at least say it in here. First of all, to answer your question specifically, yeah, it started as making boundary recommendation. In the RFP, absolutely, WXY were supposed to give boundary recommendation. Now, when this whole thing started, and sadly the residents and the parents realized what's going on and what happened in Clarksburg, what happened in New York, which WXY, what they've done the analysis in New York as well, and moved kids, and it's been a big roar and a mess. They started to worry about why WXY will do the same thing here in Montgomery County. This is very scary for many, many people, many, many residences, and they had a lot of questions. So when the Board of Education realized that this is becoming a huge issue and a lot of people are angry, then they revised the RFP. And now, which is good, now they're just doing boundary study or analysis and they're not making a recommendation, they shouldn't, because the recommendations they made in New York are very, very, very scary. And
But it seems like it's not good enough that they changed it. Like for example, hey, you once supported this candidate, and you say, well, now I don't. It's like, but you did once, so you're kind of, you're looked at it a certain way. Like there's no fixing it. So even though they tried to fix it, it seems like it didn't do anything.
what do you mean by that?
You said the RFP changed, and now it's no longer.
Exactly. So
but
now they're
everyone
spending
still
475.
thinks.
No. It's not that. The people
No?
are worried about. It's okay that we listen. I think everybody understands that there needs to be an analysis. We need to look at countywide. I think the question is, what is the vision? Why they have paid $475,000 for a study and boundary recommendation? Now they're saying no boundary recommendation, which is good because that's what it's supposed to do.
Except
I think the contract is actually $2 million over 3 years. They can expand the contract. It doesn't end for $775,000. Doesn't have to end there. What data they're using? Because the biggest thing, if you're paying so much money to a company to do a study, some company not from this area, you're supplying them data. I think the biggest scary part for everybody is what data they're supplying. What are they calling? I mean, the FAA was changed in the last minute without people noticing. That is a big issue. I'd actually like to ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
So the FAA, suddenly on the last 11 days, was changed to especially diversity.
That's right.
Okay. Are you for it? And why was it changed? And why didn't they give the residents enough time to actually comment for it? Why was it done in the last 11 days?
So actually, as I recall, we actually got more feedback during that 11 days than we did during the 5 months previous.
Right, because it's a big change. 11 days is not enough.
So, and the difference was in the 4 factors. So there's 4 factors, and this is not a new thing, just so you know. We do boundary studies, all the time.
Right.
And we have additions. And we always use these same factors, these are categories we made up. Some people think that these are categories that we just make up. These are the same categories for demographics that are used by the Department of Education, by the Maryland State Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education. They're tracked in many different ways. And we've always used those. And you can look right now on MCPS for any boundary study in any school, and you'll see the demographics are used. And how that changes, how this percentage change with, and utilization changes with each option. That's just how it works. So those 4 factors went out for public comment as part of a huge change, which needed to happen in FAA, which is changing to something called facility indicators. We had a way of addressing our school construction for decades that was basically just a long list, and it was created at a point in time, and it wasn't based on what schools were the most overcrowded, what schools were the oldest,
But the
what
FAA actually have the 4 characters, and they're equally weighted, which include proximity and utilization.
It never said they were equally weighted. I can show you the policy. It just said these are the 4 factors that are prioritized. It never said equally weighted. They're prioritized. They're still prioritized. They're still prioritized. It's not that it's just diversity now. The other factors, stability over time, geography, they're all still in the policy. I can show you the policy.
Right, but except the change was
especially diversity.
So it went elevated more than proximity.
And as Dr. Smith said, and I have to tell you, we have 2 existing policies that this is confusing. I'll just tell you, we are a huge system. It's the 14th largest school system out of 14,000 school systems in this country. 206 schools, 163,000 students. We have dozens and dozens of policies, and I certainly don't expect everybody. And not only that, they're not titled by what you think. They're titled by these letters that have nothing to do with the content. So FAA is our boundary guidance. It's the guidance we use, and FAA-RA are the regulations around how we do the boundaries. So even, let's say, this scenario happened, which is my desirable scenario, that this company did make recommendations, which a lot of us would love for them to do, which has been taken out, and I understand you're opposed to that. They're opposed to the recommendations.
No, I'm worried about it. That's all.
She's worried. She's worried about it. And I certainly understand. I mean, this is, like I say, this is really complex, and we can discuss the size of our system another time because there's issues with that too.
You're right.
But when it comes to this issue about these complicated policies with RA, which are the regulations, those regulations are still in there. So even if this company made recommendations, the board could reject all of the recommendations, or they could say, well, we're going to look at these 2 recommendations, or these 5 recommendations. Then they'd have to follow a very detailed, prescribed boundary study process for any one of those boundaries that was recommended to be changed, which is a months-long process. And the only times that the board approves boundaries or has those discussions, that it comes before the board, is in November and March. Those are the only times of the year when those are even approved. So if we really wanted to do a comprehensive analysis and a comprehensive rebalancing of the schools, so if we have schools that are right beside each other, we can get rid of the 14 portables on one and fill up the other school. We would actually have to redo policy FAA because it's not set up to do that right now. You have to have a study for every school boundary that you want to change, with certain groups that have to participate in that study.
So you touched on something that I was kind of curious about. I know that with almost anything, when I have my mind set on something, no matter what kind of recommendation you may give, I'm going to still probably think what I've always thought. So that's kind of something. If they were to give a recommendation, you said the Board of Ed didn't have to go with it. They didn't have to. And that's kind of something.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, no, of course, and that's something that it's almost as if I think, and this is what a couple people shared with me, that the fear, and this was a couple people that I spoke with outside the White Oak meeting. They said, we're afraid that the Board of Ed is going to make a decision they've already made in their heads, regardless of what happens.
Right.
So
that's why, and I'll tell you, that's why you get the like this boundary studies.
Yeah.
And that is scary for people because you can accept or reject what people have told you. I can tell you, as a member of the Board of Education, we received a lot of feedback during those comment periods, like that 5 months on FAA. At the end of the day, you take in that feedback and you decide, they had a really good point about this. We need to change this. Or you can say, they didn't like this, which, that's the prerogative, but we're going to change it anyway. That's what happens with this diversity.
So with the FAA,
the 4 factors were part of that, and they measured that. And it came back to the board, and what people said is, diversity is really important, and geography is really important. Those were the 2 most important. Judgment call, board member is, we already have 2 policies, and here I go again with these initials, ACD and ACA. And one, ACD, is our integrated school policy, and ACA is our equity policy. Both of these policies already say we're supposed to be putting integration and equitable opportunities for all students in all schools as our number 1. So our policies had already prioritized that. At that meeting where I said we actually, as I recall, got more feedback on that change of policy, we had a discussion. I think it was Ms. O'Neill said both of those were weighed equally in the feedback we got. And I said, well, according to our policies, ACD, ACA, and our vision and mission for this school system.
But I think the mistake and where they lost a lot of people confidence in the Board of Education is they made a major change, which is elevating diversity over proximity for school. It's elevated, meaning it's more important that it's diversified than your kids being bused. That's what people are very worried about it, because this change gave only 11 days for comment, where they usually should have had 5 months. When you make such a major change, I think you will lose people confidence unless you give them the right the 5 months is supposed to have.
Except that
that's where it was.
The 5 months on
not
those
for that,
4
but
factors.
not for that. That's But
and then we use that feedback.
When you make a major change like that in the last 11 days, that is where you lose confidence. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it.
Right.
This is where you lost so many confidence. The other reason, what happened in Clarksburg. So when you look at what happened in Clarksburg, people are very worried about it because they see what's happening in Clarksburg right now, where they shifted kids against the 82% of the surveys by the county residents. 82% of the surveys picked one option, but the Board of Education picked a totally different option against 82% of the voters. So when that happens, that is scary.
So I can't, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's a, another one-off bound. If you're within 2 miles of an elementary school, that's a walk zone. If you're 1.5 miles middle school, that's your walk zone. If you're in a mile for an elementary school, that's your, I mean,
Yeah, my
2 miles high school, one,
Yeah.
mine
Thank
happened
you.
one. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so those walk zones, that policy hasn't changed. Those are still walk zones. That's still a priority as walk zones. The only thing that changes there is if there is a highway, railroad tracks,
Or
major
diversity.
intersection. Or
Diversity will trump that. Diversity is more important than the walk zone, actually, at this point.
No, walk zone is still, that policy is still, that's still.
But if it is, then
prioritized.
why
You
did they
can't
move the
usurp
kids
that.
in Clarksburg? If that's true, then why did they make that decision against 82% of the voters in Clarksburg if walkability is the number one?
I can't comment on Clarksburg because I'm not on the board, and I have heard different things about different things that were prioritized by the community and the way survey questions were asked and all that. So what I have to stay with is that we need to utilize our facilities to the best way we can for taxpayer dollars. So
I'm gonna ask you this last question that goes to both of you. We only have a couple minutes here left, but what's a compromise? And honestly, I don't think there is a compromise. You know, it doesn't look like there's a compromise.
Actually, I believe there is.
Oh,
Go
well,
ahead.
that's what I'm going to ask. What's a compromise that I think that you all think that could possibly be reached? Obviously, I'm not naming specifics. Not like this neighborhood goes there and this neighborhood goes here. But what's a compromise that could possibly be reached to kind of settle this in a way that not makes both sides happy, but doesn't leave both sides, upset and making Facebook groups with thousands of people?
Well, I think this is first of all, I think this is a learning experience. This is an awesome learning experience. So many people have reached out to me and said, I had no idea that we had some schools that have 1% farms and some schools that have 95% farms. I had no idea we had schools that were 201% capacity and some schools that were 68% capacity. So I think this is really important, regardless of how hard this struggle is. It's really important for people to learn what we're dealing with because everybody in this county is investing in our schools. Everybody in this county is investing in the future of the children of our county. And the more everybody knows, the better decisions we can all make. And I think the partnership is extremely important. If anybody knows me, I was on social media all the time while I was on the board saying, we're changing this, we're doing this, we're not doing that, give us your feedback, because I do think that, and even during that time period where people are saying it was a secret, I posted, and I post, if you've seen my posts, they're about
Still, it's
a
11
book long,
days.
right?
Yeah.
I posted, said, give your feedback, here's all the reasons we're doing this. I'm hoping that maybe our communications department, MCPS, will add more information about all this to the website. I think that would be really helpful for people who are still learning about it. And it's easy to jump to all kinds of conclusions when you don't have the facts. So we get the facts out to everybody as much as we can.
Yeah, facts. That's really good. I appreciate you saying that. I think transparency is the number
Absolutely.
one. Because what's going on around here, people feel that somewhat they're being fooled or somehow secretly things have happened behind the scene. And the trust is a big issue right now. So the FAA, the 11 days of the FAA, it's a biggie. What's happening in Clarksburg is huge because that happened kind of against everybody's vote. And WXY, what they did in New York, is a real biggie because I don't know if people know, but they made it so their accommodation now in New York that first of all, farm kids are making decisions where they're going to go or apply for the schools they want to go to, and then the rest of the kids can apply. It's kind of fluid, so you don't have really a school zone. The rest of the kids apply, and then if there's no room, they'll give you whatever place you're going to go to.
So is it a choice model?
So
Is
it's
that
a
what
choice model,
yeah.
which is really, really scary because you really don't have a school cluster anymore, and you
Or
get homeschool. Disadvantage because you're not a farm at this point, no matter what kind of program you want to have. And so that's a big issue. That's very scary if this is what WXY kind of recommending here. Of course, people don't want that. So they're looking at what happened, and these are real facts. So I think what we have to do and is transparency in data. What is WXY? I mean, the Board of Education is giving WXY data. It's $500,000. It should have a long vision. there are, myself as a realtor, there's 13,000 units coming into right here in this area where we're sitting right now. 13,000 new residential units coming up. Are these in the analysis? If we think there's some schools underutilized, seriously, I mean, we have all these builders coming in the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually,
So
most
where
of
is
our,
the data?
So
that
most
is-
of our, and that you can look on our website and find out more about this, but actually most of when our schools become more populated is from neighborhood turnover. So, you know, families age out, flip, and that's actually where most of the population growth comes in. But in our overcrowded schools, but for our new development, our facilities planning staff actually, they're aware of all of the development that's been approved. And they certainly pay attention to when permits are pulled, and they have formulas for figuring out what is the likelihood of development coming online.
Right,
And they stay in
so-
touch with all of the developers to say, are you going to build? Because here's the thing, we can have plans for all kinds of development all over this county, which is great. But you don't know if they're going to be able to get financing. You don't know if they're ever going to pull that permit. You don't know if they're going to go belly up. You don't know if we're going to hit a recession.
So I'm going to just finish what I said.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is we want to make sure that the data is there and it's analyzed. And there are definitely developments that are there in the moratorium right now, so they don't analyze them actually because it's under moratorium. But I know with speaking to developers, they're going to be breaking ground as soon as moratorium is over. So my question is, my thing is that we should look at the long vision, not looking at counting students to 2024. That's a very short vision. By the time you finalize the study, that it's no longer in effect. It's not even make sense. And for example, Laxman Elementary School just been through revitalization, added a lot of money to it and everything else. Same thing as a Farmland Elementary School, and both are overcrowded before they even moved back into the school. So I think the vision is short term. I think we have to make sure transparency is there. Data, we need to see the data, and we need to make sure the intent is really to actually look at the voters, and when we do a survey, listen to it, because it didn't in Clarksburg.
All right. Well, I know we could talk about this forever, but
couldn't
we
talk
do.
about it
We
forever.
can. We
She
do
made
have
a couple
to
of good points I wanted
cut
to answer.
short. No, and obviously we can get back together. We do plan on making this, a regular series until something happens one way or the other. But thank you so much to both of you for joining us today on the special boundary analysis episode of the
Thank
MoCo
you.
Show. Nurit, Jill, thank you
Thank
all
you.
both.
Jill, I appreciate it.
Yes, thank
You're
you so
great. Thank
much.
you so
Oh, I
much.
appreciate it.
All right, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All
Wow.
right.
To your point about the overcrowded, as soon as it opened, I started noticing.